the team that we're gonna present about today. And the format of our presentation will really demonstrate how integrated and interrelated all of the work we do is, and how it serves all of the people in the state who are doing history and heritage related work. And the program, how we talk about it today, is going to be presented by different people, but each of those presentations contain programs and projects that were led by other folks. So when you ask questions, we might jump in a little bit differently on that. But again, that's just highlighting the interrelatedness of all of this. All right, so at the John Day meeting last spring, you heard from the State Historic Preservation Office. So that's part of the Oregon Heritage. And you got to hear a lot about the National Register and archaeology and permits and survey and things like that. We are the Outreach Bureau, so there are 4 of us on the team. We have Katie and Sherry in the room, and then Cam is listening from home today, trying to remain safe from the pending wind, which she's already feeling at her. So, Katie's going to be doing some of that presentation as well. So, just sort of show of hands, and maybe even for everyone in the room, when you're driving around in your community, do you ever drive by a little historic cemetery? Yeah. Yeah. Or an old schoolhouse, or historic downtown. Yeah, next door. That's one of our mentor organizations, or mentee organizations. How about when people come to visit you from out of town? Do you take them to your local museum or a cool restaurant in a historic building?
No, Silver Creek.
Okay, there you go. That too. That is also historic. That's all.
There you go.
We do it all. So chances are, if you've seen those things or done those things, we have probably supported the people and organizations that are working on that at some point. So as I said, we serve all people doing this work. You may not know there are over 200 museums in the state of Oregon. That's just a piece of the folks that we serve: genealogical societies, historical societies, people doing archaeology, public history, community development, archives, libraries, kind of all of our things. Historic property.
Turn them down.
So what we do is provide resources to them, and with that, we really work hard to make those resources accessible and scalable for where they are and what they want to achieve. We have 4 or 5 key areas of work that we focus on. So one area is statewide coordination of resources, particularly the Heritage Commission and the Oregon Main Street Network is key in doing that kind of high level coordination, finding partner organizations to work with us, developing resources that can serve people all over the state rather than one entity at a time, and finding tools, bringing in larger scale grants. And you'll hear about some of those examples today. So really that coordination to provide resources statewide that serve all the people. And then to, on the sort of other side of that, to build the network of people doing this work so that they know that who else is out there, they can go to each other for support and ideas. They can show up in a community and know that they have an ally and someone to talk to or vent to, or just know that they're not alone. So a lot of our work is built around building that network of folks. And then we provide lots of resources, and you're going to hear all about that through all of the programs on the screen there. We offer grant funding, which I will kind of do a point at the end of this to highlight the grant work that we offer. But essentially, I want to highlight the way we go about doing this work but we really want to make it accessible to people, manageable, and inclusive. So some of the tools we use to get there, one, just so you know where our budget comes from, we do use money. So we have the OPRD budget. Most of what funds the outreach section, this team of 4, is lottery funding. We also use Oregon Cultural Trust funding. We are, the Oregon Heritage Commission and the State Historic Preservation Office both are partners of the Oregon Cultural Trust, and so we get annual grant funding through them. And that's where a fair amount of our project work is funded, and you'll learn more about a few of those today. We do have a little bit of the Federal Historic Preservation Fund. You heard about that when you heard from SHPO, but the Certified Local Government Program is also funded through that National Park Service funding. We, for our conferences, we charge a small registration fee. We make it as affordable as possible. And then we also get sponsorships to support those conferences. We have some external private funding through the MEDAC Trust and the Sally Donovan Award to support our grant programs for historic cemeteries. And then the lottery bond funds fund the Oregon Main Street Revitalization Grant when that is approved by the legislature. So we do have a cycle of that coming up, and I'll talk a little bit about that at the end. And then we do go for external competitive grants. So in the last 10 years, we've had hundreds of thousands of dollars awarded through the Institute for Museum and Library Services and a few grants through National Park Service. I would be remiss if I did not bring up data and the need to manage data in our office. I know you heard a lot about that from SHPO when they presented as well. You hear a lot about it all the time from us, but it is a critical thing that we manage. I just listed some of the numbers of people and organizations and historic resources that we track just on the outreach side of things. It's a lot. And we currently use OPRIS as one of our tools for the grant program, but we have several other access databases that we use to manage these resources. And I'm taking them as far as we can go, but it's a lot of tracking and keeping aware of information that we're managing and the partners. We also rely a ton on plans. So the state as an enterprise has DEIA plans and principles of operations and all of that. And then the agency has our mission and our operating principles and our goals and our 4 focus areas. And then we step down another tier and go to the Oregon Heritage Plan and the Oregon State Historic Preservation Plan. Those are our big guiding tools. So the goals in those plans, we always aim to look at those and make sure that all the work that we are doing will help move those goals forward. We also have 2 other plans that we use a lot. One is the Oregon Main Street Strategic Plan. That's an internal plan that we use for that program, and it has some very specific goals you'll hear about in a little bit from Sherry. And then we also have a communications. So the agency, OPRD, has a communications team, and they do all kinds of work. Within Heritage and under outreach, we do all of the communications for this section and for all of the Heritage divisions. So that's a lot of work, and we had to develop a plan to determine our audience and our tone and all of that, which I'll share in a couple of seconds here. But these are our major documents. The next thing we really spend a lot of time focusing on is evaluation and priority setting. During COVID, we learned a ton. We lost 1 position from the team, so we went from 4 to 3. We had a position switch roles. So there was a lot of shifting priorities and learning that happened at that time. And despite all of that, the closures that happened did not diminish the work that was needed. In fact, our downtowns particularly, and our museums, but our downtowns particularly needed us way more than they ever did before to help figure out how to keep their downtowns thriving, how to keep these cultural areas thriving, how to help people have community during that time. And then the wildfires happened, and so we were responding to those as well. So this was a good eye opener. We knew that those things were a priority and we shifted and we could see some things that we were doing that maybe didn't have to be done quite as much or in the same way or by us. And that gave us a lens to kind of continue that thinking through to now and into the future. We had already been thinking that way and adjusting based on our capacity. So one really big example that I bring up all the time is the Oregon Heritage Conference, which is awesome, but it takes a lot of our capacity to do. We have 300 people at least come to that. It's in multiple locations, lots of moving parts. We realized that we could not pull that off every year. So we started doing a Heritage Conference in 1 year and then a smaller, focused theme where everyone's in the same room. So we only have one venue. It's a shorter amount of time. But we still can serve the needs of the people that we are here to provide resources for. So we had already kind of made shifts like that. So what we learned in COVID kind of affirmed where we were going and pushed us to do a little bit more. We have continued to use those evaluative tools, some that we had ongoing, so needs assessments is a big one. You're going to hear a little bit about the Oregon Heritage Vitality Report that was just released last week. It is the second of 2 of those. We did one of those in 2010 as well, and that really informs what folks were serving need out there. But we've done other ones, like ones related to digitization, ones related to volunteerism, recovery from COVID. We've done all kinds of assessments in regard to needs. And we continue to realize how critical that is in what we do. We evaluate our staff time and budget consistently. We also pay attention to the capacity of the people we serve, which is something we've been learning really recently, like dial it back. How many surveys are you gonna send them? How many conferences can they show up for? Like what are they gonna be able to actually manage and walk away and be able to take action on, so not overloading with too much. So that's a new thing we've added into our thinking. And then we're creating these fun little tools which we call decision-making rubrics, but to determine things like when should it be in person or online for who we're serving and for our capacity, when should it be translated, when should it not be, when should it be posted on the website, all of these questions. We're really being thoughtful about those, both for our capacity and for the need. And then the big one is, are we the ones to do it? Which leads to our partners, which are huge assets for us. You're going to hear a lot about our partners today. One example with, and this is just a few, we have tons of partners who are doing great work with us, for us. But one of them I wanted to highlight is the Nonprofit Association of Oregon. They've really shifted how they do things over the last few years and have become really strong partners with us, recognizing that these small nonprofit organizations are critical for their work and providing really great services. And now they're going to be an awesome partner with us for the summit this spring. So that has been a really great developing partnership, and you'll hear about some other ones from everybody else. The partnerships are the big deal, and they take a lot of time and energy, but they're super very fun. So I'm going to pause there on resources we use. Then I'm gonna jump in on the work we do. I'm gonna do a little piece of it and then pass it off to Katie. So I mentioned before that we do communications for all of Oregon Heritage, so the SHPO side and the outreach team. We have the website, which might seem small, but our website is giant. There's so much information on there and it's a ton to manage. So the website is a key piece. We have publications, which we do get assistance from the communications division frequently on. We have some technical resources publications. We have the Oregon Heritage Exchange blog where we highlight examples for people to view. We have a list, we have 2 big listservs, both in the range of 2,000 followers, a little bit more than that, that get at least weekly resource lists to use. And then we do all of our press releases, so communications is a big piece of our work that's kind of spread across the board. So with that, I'm gonna hand it off to Katie, who's gonna talk about the next section.
Thank you, commissioners, for allowing us the opportunity to speak today, and thanks for setting up the context and reaffirming why I love working with this team based on some of those tenets and principles, because it really is threaded throughout everything we do. And the Oregon Heritage Commission is one of 4 state committees and commissions under the umbrella of the heritage sector. And really the broadest in the scope of what it's charged to do and the heritage interests that the commissions to keep in mind when they're doing their work. It was founded in 1995 by legislature. If you are a nerd and like footnotes like I do, you can go chase down those ORSs, but I'm going to highlight some of the statutory duties that are outlined in there in a minute. 9 governor appointed commissioners, 9 advisory commissioners, and in statutes by agency and statewide organization, and we have designees that serve as those advisory commissioners, which really goes to some of the primary duties and fulfilling those primary duties, which we'll see here in a second. I'm going to leave that first one till last because those 4 words are deceivingly simple for that duty. As Craig mentioned, preparing and adopting the Oregon Heritage Plan is one of the duties listed in statute. And we really, the commission and the work that we do, it's not a plan that we do and we set to the side. We really invest in it and go through a process to make sure it's meaningful in how we carry out the work and what we're asking everybody in the state to do. Heritage tourism is called out specifically. So the commission worked hard in supporting heritage tourism efforts and identifying and messaging the value of heritage resources in statewide tourism. And then back to that very coordination of heritage activities. In statute, the commission is the primary agency for coordination of heritage activities and to coordinate activities with public and private organizations that express an interest in the heritage of Oregon. In line with this is also the charge to increase efficiency and avoid duplication among various interest groups that seek to preserve heritage resources. So just that, you just have to do that. And it's, again, just threaded throughout everything that we do for the interests of those that we serve. Coordinating, communicating, leveraging resources, not being duplicative in the work we're doing. It really is central to that. This is a few examples where this coordination is pretty evident in terms of outcomes and process. You have the vitality study that Curry mentioned. You know, I was talking to them at lunch. It's easy to talk to 5 people across the state on the phone, and they may say the same thing, but we're making assumptions based on that doesn't feel great. We want to make sure that that really is a need, and that really is something we should be talking about at the state level. So we do these needs assessments to get data behind it, to talk to those 264 organizations that filled out the survey, the 10 interviews from across the state and 60 workshop participants, to be able to get to what is the root issue of some of these issues, you know, and formulate how we can address them at the state level. And that's, again, going back to, that doesn't mean this is a problem, we have to be the ones to solve it. we are identifying the leagues that we hope will carry that mantle and work with us or approach them and say, how can we support you? It makes total sense for you to do this and we want to support this work. And so that's kind of a key thing, when we're looking at sustainable impact on those that we serve and helping them do heritage preservation work. And integral in this process was, tapping those partners that we have and getting representatives on the advisory group to get buy-in in that process of, creating or helping to inform the issues and the recommendations. With the idea that they can use those recommendations with the initiatives and their planning efforts with their agencies and organizations. Northwest Digital Heritage, on the slide, with Northwest Digital Heritage front facing, well, I do want to say that this Northwest Digital Heritage is an outcome of an over 15-year partnership, relationship, and conversation about digitization and access to collections. A partnership and relationship and conversation that transcends coordinators, people on both sides of that, with the State Library of Oregon and Oregon Heritage Commission, which just goes to show how our process that we do is important in creating those sustainable threads of conversation that outlast individuals and personalities. The front facing for Northwest Digital Heritage is kind of a main site, clearinghouse of records, historic records pulled from over 200 organizations. The idea being that you want to look up something on women's suffrage. You may not know the 10 really notable collections from 10 different organizations and 10 websites. You can go to this one and it pulls from over 250 organization online collections. So it's a really great research tool. The back end, which is where the commission focused a lot of its effort, is providing training, technical assistance to small heritage organizations that want to find a path to get to digitizing their collection, which just help preserve it, and then find a way to get them online for people to access these important cultural materials across the state. So that is where the commission focuses its effort, but it is a partnership between commission, State Library of Oregon, and Washington State Library. Several months back, I think, I can't remember which one, but you had a resolution that crossed your agenda here at a commission meeting about the Collections Coordinating Group Disaster Resilience and Response Plan. Again, that is three entities, 2 different agencies, State Library of Oregon, State Archives, the Heritage Commission, that in statute has to come together and coordinate, but we really do that in a meaningful way that has a product of a disaster resilience and response plan. So that's another example of some of the coordination we do. You know, we have to put America 250 there because that's coming up here. I'm not going to say the official name of it because I will not do that well. So I just say the 250th. But this is really, the commission is has a representative on there. The Heritage Commission has a representative on the 250th Commission, and it's an opportunity again to make sure diverse perspectives are represented, and that this is the anniversaries like this are an opportunity for the state to highlight the value of the heritage organizations and the work that they do. Most of them small, most of them all volunteer. I'll say many of them small, many of them all volunteer, and the work that they do in documenting, preserving, and sharing the stories that make up Oregon's heritage. So the president setting 2011 mortality study, a lot of the things I'll touch on that was a needs assessment, and some of these were products that we're going to talk about today are a result of that, and addressing those issues and those recommendations in there. So the value of heritage was a really big, being able to talk about and show the value of heritage is really difficult for some of the folks on the ground at the local level doing this work because they're volunteering. They intrinsically know. Somebody says, why is that important? They're like, how can you not value this? I don't know what you mean, it just is. And that's really easy to say that because it's intrinsic. And so we provide the data and the messaging for those folks to be able to talk about the value and get that community support, and especially talking to decision makers and grantors and all the different entities that can help elevate the work that they're doing or support it as well. So she mentioned a few of them, Curry did, but here are some other examples of some of the reports and the messaging tool. It's very hard to find consultants to do some of these, this feels maybe it's really niche or something, but also you can find them to do the data piece. Transitioning that to a messaging tool is a whole other skill set, and oftentimes staff has to work on that, which you know, correlation is another skill set as well. So it's a feat, but we have some really great products for those that we serve to use in what they do. Some of the programs we use to support the communities, I'm just lost track in this my page, I'm just going. There's designations that we do. We're gonna talk about 3 of them. One of them is actually in statute, and that's the 3rd one I will talk about, but the All-Star Community is my favorite designation. It's like a child, you know, my favorites. Oops. And the purpose of it, it's really, honestly, it's really asking the local communities to do what we're trying to do at the state level, which is coordinate, leverage, and just embrace all of the heritage resources and activities in a coordinated way. And so it helps communities make the most out of their heritage resources so they can advance quality of life and economic objectives and embrace and enhance the unique character of their communities. And there's 24 criteria that kind of speaks to all the different heritage preservation activities in the community. 15 are required for designation. Benefits that they receive are technical support from our office every other year, using the commission currently has committed to every other year a portion of its Oregon Cultural Trust statewide partner funds to provide grants to these communities to do some of the work to strive for the criteria. And also it's a really good group to go to when we have some special initiatives that we want to try and do pilot work in or formulate some processes and guides, which we'll talk about in a couple slides. Here's a list of communities between this slide and the next slide. We might create some itineraries for you as you're traveling across the state. I put Coos Bay on here because it is our most recently designated all-star community. One conversation I had with somebody who was part of that process, it's like I couldn't have scripted it better. It was this application process was awesome because we talked to each other, we coordinated with each other. Oh, I didn't know you did that. That's cool. And they're continuing that coordination. And it was like, oh my gosh, thank you for just scripting that all out for us.
Question on those, who holds the designation? So is it somebody at the city who you speak with on a regular basis?
The city applies, yes.
Okay, and then they hold, so like, if you said that you use them as a resource and like, work with them, you reach out to a specific person in the city or?
Yes,
Okay.
we have contacts. And then the grants are to the city that we do. Does that answer? Yeah. And then the city coordinates with the other actors doing those activities in theory, right? That's it. And they get a sign, it's a certification process, there's regular check-ins that are done. Let's see here. Here's another list of things. Oregon Heritage Tradition is another designation we have, and this is really to support the charge of supporting heritage tourism in the state. Their annual, local, regional, or statewide events with at least 50 years of continuous operation that meets all six of the criteria for the designation. There are some usual suspects on that list, but there are some that are maybe you have not had the chance to participate in or attend the Bend Pet Parade, Fourth of July Pet Parade. And that community feels very passionate about it. I actually have an archivist that is trying to send me proof for an earlier start date, earlier than 1932. Which then, again, the nerd in me appreciates this. You have the Lake County Pioneer Picnic in Brownsville, the Fiesta Mexicana, and then our most recently designated heritage tradition is Portland Saturday Market. Are any of those, have you attended any of those?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
There, I live with that.
Yeah.
It's somebody who went. We don't really have there. It's just the field.
Glory days, I mean, I have an application I can send you, and I'll buy it all, glory days, and if you know, now think of any that might be 50 years or older, certainly send them our way, and we'll, let them know the process. And then this is the one that actually, is in the statute, it's, statewide anniversary commemoration, actually, it started out when it was first written as statewide anniversary celebration, and then in 2018, the commission embarked on a name change for it. I think with Katie's help a lot, and it did go through, and it's now commemoration instead of celebration. The idea being, the goal was to allow for this designation to be more inclusive and recognizing the impact of important historical events on all Oregonians. And to expand the types of events that can be recognized, and you can see a list of some of the statewide commemorations there. Recognition, Director Sumption has been to our Excellence Awards banquet and enthusiastically has supported it. And we have since 2007 recognized over 125 people, projects, and organizations. And it, you know, it goes beyond the event, it goes beyond the really awesome piece of art that is given as an award. Like a light show over there. See how fun it is on the outreach. And it looked like these, we have seen some amazing ways these awards have been leveraged beyond that night. There have been some that have gone on to win national awards. They've been leveraged for continued partnerships, new partnerships, increased funding. I've seen them in grant applications being leveraged to get those additional funds needed to do the work. Some examples of national projects that have gone on to receive national attention include the Chinese Diaspora Project, Vanport Mosaic, City of Salem, Historic Landmarks Commission, for the tribal consultation process that they've done, this has been couple national awards at this point, in addition to state awards. So shining that light on work being done in Oregon at a national level is just really awesome to see that happening. And because there's so much happening at the local level. Okay, so last slide. Case study. So speaking of award winners, the community-wide disaster planning effort that was done in 2020. Little did the project LegalNet know that it would also wrap up addressing the pandemic during it, in addition to all the other disaster planning efforts. We went to one of our all-star communities, Cottage Grove, to do that pilot project, and the result was the development of the Community Disaster Resilience Planning for Heritage Resources Guidebook. That is a mouthful. And it was the first effort in Oregon to create this community-wide resilience plan for heritage resources. And then it provides a framework and lessons learned for other Oregon communities looking to increase the resilience of local heritage resources and organizations. So there's kind of a two-tiered effort. There's some individual organizational plans happening, but also how they feed into that and connect in the community-wide to identify strengths and weaknesses and how to leverage, again, resources together to move some of those planning efforts along so that you can be a resilient community should a disaster happen. And some of the outcomes of this are, of course, a plan for the community and for organizations, but we've also seen organizations use the, kind of the action steps for how to move forward in grant applications, so, multiple grant applications. As I mentioned and alluded to, the guidebook and the process won a national award and a state award. The project also received a FEMA grant that, staff and, is working with, University of Oregon Institute for Policy Research and Engagement. I agree, I did that. No, exactly. So, and what we're doing with that grant is implementing this process in all of our all-star heritage communities. And then at the same time, exploring for how this process can be used, not just at the community level, but in statewide networks and entities that have heritage resources in different parts of the state, and how they can leverage that for moving some work forward in preparing for potential disasters in the future. So that's a lot, but that work is still happening and evolving, and it's had some pretty great impacts. And I am now handing it over to Sherry Stewart, coordinator of the Oregon Main Street Network.
Okay, time out. Let me ask some questions, okay? First, Sherry, thanks so much for all your help. You've been great. 80% of the party. Thank you for that. But so as I listen to this, and I listen to you use the word heritage, I can't figure out a definition. Do you have a definition for that word? Because it's a moving target.
Right, I have a definition in Google, right, that we could use. Should we use that?
Shall we take?
And I mean, we use different variations of this, I would say. Probably a social experiment on how we change it, but Oregon's heritage as a DIP. So OAR 736-053-0305 defines Oregon heritage as a collection of significant activities, thoughts, and things associated with the human experience in Oregon. Does that help?
Who uses Northwest Digital Heritage?
Well, that's kind of a multi-pronged answer. So, you have researchers that use it for research purposes. You have other organizations that can use it to find, fill in some gaps in information in the research those organizations are doing, whether it's interpretation or exhibits. But then you have those that are using it to be able to get their collections online, to get access to it, to host collections online, and to get help with digitizing it.
So, I get that part. I think it's a really valuable tool. But then I sit on Burns and think, who's looking at this stuff? Because we're all working together to put it together. But who's the actual user? Other researchers, that totally makes sense.
Yeah.
But are we seeing the average person getting into it and doing it? Would we know that it's there?
Yeah, so. Sherry is dying to answer that. I'm dying to hear.
I am, my husband, he wanted to research at, the whole history, we have a 1950s house. And he wanted to research who lived in the house at what period and information about them, and he tracked it all the way back and has a whole timeline. And the funny thing is he came to me and said, hey, do you know about this really cool tree? Yeah, pretty much. Well, yes, Anderson does stumble onto it and find.
And I will add, this is year 3 of Northwest Digital Heritage, and my current, I'm like a thorn in my partner's side is to do exactly what you're talking about and advertise it to the average, to a person, my husband apparently. And we're trying right now, the current is to talk to the libraries that provide the those opportunities for community members to come in and utilize it if they're interested in history and learning more about the community or the state. It also filters into a national search engine. There's different hubs. I didn't want to get in the weeds because I'm a self-admitted nerd. Hubs across the country that this national DPLA, Digital Public Library of America, takes all of that information into a national. So you can search at a regional level or a national level.
So. We're sort of getting perspective again, but if we look at this and we look at this, really great people are gonna look at all this stuff out here. But what we really need is put in how we build it. And we're trying to figure out how to tie that together with it. Hey, you wanna see that stuff that you think reserves, it's here, we got. And I don't know if you can help with that, if you have a conversation, but it's a value I think we can get out.
For sure. I have talked to some folks. We do work with the library and historical society there. But thank you for that feedback. And those are important questions that we do ask ourselves a lot as well.
And so I have one more, I apologize if it's a little bit pessimistic, but. We went through a whole list of things, including the All-Stars, and I'll just use it for an example. So. Ben's an All-Star, too. So what? When I think about. Those cities, I don't think of them as All-Stars. If there's something I'm missing, is what do you get out of the All-Stars?
What do the communities get out of it?
Yeah.
That's what I think, first thing I think of the growth first. So, yeah.
Right, well, I mean, part of it is to provide the mechanisms for the city to leverage all of those resources and highlight the unique character of that town, of that community. So part of it is to facilitate that process and have them coordinate on all of that. And really, it is up to the community to leverage it. We provide the opportunity to leverage that. And how they do that, we certainly can provide advice and support, but it's how best. We do some advertising for traditions and All-Star heritage communities at the state level, when we can, and the opportunity and money to do that. But also just encourage the local community to leverage it in their work.
I have a question too. Is it possible to go back to the last slide? Just wondering why you, in the lower right hand corner, you put a big zero.
Should be green. Dear world.
It's for cereal bosses.
Zero custom tickets.
We're having way too much fun. That's good, that means we're in the right meeting. I'm Sherry Stewart, I'm coordinating the statewide Oregon Street Network. I'll be covering the Oregon Street Network and our certified local government program, which are part of each team's efforts. It's really a pleasure to talk to you about my favorite subject, with Oregon Main Street. We are here to help our local communities and support their efforts in enhancing and sustaining their historic downtown and their neighborhood commercial districts. Local communities across the whole spectrum, those that are just working out, and then those that have been involved for a very long time to continue to be successful in the organization efforts. When did this start out? I just posed this question. What does an afternoon look like in your community to you? When you have free Saturday walk periods, you wonder what happens in the town. Are there places to go? Are there things to experience? Are there events to enjoy? What is it to kind of find ourselves in a place? Because that's what you must be going on. It is places that can all come out and between context of historical preservation. And again, every time that I've been in upstate for 15 years, the Main Street 35 of them all, every town I've been in has been unique, has its own characteristics, its own set of assets. So when you think about your place, go back and put on those rosy glasses and see the potential in the teacher, depending on where it's out on construct and position. So when we think about our Oregon Main Street Network, it's important to understand that we're grounded in a national movement. Main Street America, which is a nonprofit subsidiary of the National Trust for Historic Preservation, developed this methodology. It's been acknowledged by the Development Administration as the most powerful economic development tool for downtown revitalization and community enhancement across the country. And so we're tied into that national methodology. We sign a licensing agreement with them every year. We pay a licensing fee to enable our communities to participate in this methodology and knowledge the power of the into in terms of enhancing their own local efforts. So we're not connected between Main Street and Mecca and the work that happens on the ground in our local communities. We do have to hold our communities that are actually running the Main Street track accountable to some standards that are established by Main Street America, but each state that uses this methodology is eligible to can set up their own way of designating communities and then providing services to those communities. When we started with Oregon Main Street here, we were reestablished by the legislature in 2007, and around communities in 2008. When I started the program, we hadn't been really tracking any data. We began to do that in 2010. So we had some metrics in terms of new business openings, business closures, that kind of data, public sector, private sector, reinvestment, volunteer hours. And we knew colloquially the impact that we're having over time. We could see literally communities transform before our eyes, but we didn't have really hard data on what was happening. Through some funding that was provided through the Oregon Patrol Trust and Business Oregon, we were able to contract with an outside independent consulting group, Johnstover and Associates, who did an analysis of our program between 2011 and 2021. So they were looking at all of sorts of data that they were punching through a model that they used, the implant model, which is if you ask me any questions, don't ask me the question about their model, because all I do is I see the data. What they were able to show as a result of the community having an active Main Street organization that was following the tenets of the Main Street methodology, they were able to generate this additional economic impact in communities in these broad areas in terms of historic preservation, seeing those buildings we have into a good line, in terms of economic development and supporting existing businesses and creating opportunities for new entrepreneurs, in terms of tourism and customer attraction through events and activities and marketing and activating those communities through social connections and developing partnerships and supporting their local operations. So you can see the data, overarching the economic impact as a result of the Main Streets communities doing the good work that they were doing. The additional value they got over that 10-year period was $265 million, over $265 million as a result of our Main Street program being in place. I mentioned that while we have to follow those national precepts, we could establish how we want to serve our communities. When we were established by the legislature, we wanted to serve the broadest range of communities that are at wherever they were at. And so we developed an initial tiered structure, which we tweaked a couple of years ago to enable communities just to be a connected communities with us. So they're not ready to implement the Main Street model, but they see value in being part of our network, hearing about the grant opportunities, hearing about some of the resources, being able to participate in some of our trainings and opportunities. So we have a connected communities level. We have 57 communities that are participating in that. It's very regulated. It's a very simple application form. They only have to attend one of our trainings every once in 2 years, and some of those are virtually recorded to make it as easy and accessible as possible. And then to do a very short report and have a upcoming contact. But to our Main Street track communities, we have 3 tiers. in our ministry track. Those are the communities that can save their ministry community on that are actively working on or implementing the ministry methodology. So we have our affiliated ministries, which is our introductory team. That's where we go into a lot of startup assistance. We can do some goal studies and some other things to really help that with them get off the ground and entrenched in their own goals and objectives to support their downtown and walk up to accredited ministries. Those are communities that are meeting all of Main Street America's criteria. And so we get that little recognition from Main Street America that they achieve that accredited status. But in working with our communities over these years, we knew that there was a segment that we were missing. We spend a lot of time on the road, we drive through some very, very small towns, very rural areas that may not have the capacity in and of themselves to be a Main Street community. So we're really trying to figure out how we could best serve these communities. We came up with what we call our rural regional Main Street approach. This is the first in the country to be able to do this. We know other states that are talking to us about how we can R&D the Main Street. That means we're offering and we take that high-flow confidence and some invest in something from us. But the idea with the rural regional Main Street approach is to find a regional entity that is willing to be the coordinator in terms of connecting with us, applying for grants, tracking stats and reports and all those kinds of things that Main Street organizations have to need to do this to follow their head in our tier system. And then they're able to allow various local communities, volunteers to focus on just doing projects and activities. So that they don't have that administrative burden, because most of these very small communities that are part of the organization would not have the funding to be able to pay for it, for the boards that are director or specifically. We're talking about communities in another organization or partners, which was our first hub, which covered the road and truck users in different counties, where the population is around
5,000 total in all of those. So we're talking about the 9 communities that came under their hub, including one outlier, Antelope, which wasn't being effectively served in other ways. And so they adopted them and took. So we have 9 communities now that are participating, like Condon and Wasco and Mitchell and Spray and
do they have to be incorporated cities or?
They do not, no. Actually, in our network at the Connected Communities in and of themselves, we have one that is an incorporated part of Clackamas County. That's part of our network. We try and make things as easy as possible to participate in our network. We also have Wallowa County, that is another rural regional hub. So we're really proud of the work. Those communities have now been able to access our Oregon Main Street Revitalization Grant Program for some of the projects in their areas. So we're getting our resources out to some areas where we hadn't been able to serve before. So some of our, above and beyond the Main Street Grant, when people join our network, what I hear from them is the reason they want to join is the networking opportunities. I always discount that, and we really can't underscore the importance of that opportunity to bring people together, to talk about what they're experiencing in their communities and learn from each other. One of the things that we started during the pandemic was weekly Mornings on Main call. As executive director said, their mom call. Mornings on Main. I didn't realize that acronym until somebody brought it up in one of our calls. It's like, yes, our weekly mom call. But we started that during the pandemic, but they value it so greatly. Every time we try and kind of sunset it or dial it back a little bit, they're like, no, we want to meet every week. So we do. Once a week, we have a virtual call, and sometimes it's very informal. And sometimes we bring in a guest speaker on our third Thursday morning on Main. So that networking through our listserv, Mornings on Main, quarterly network meetings, our Main Street Conference, those kinds of things are networking opportunities. And people join because they value that. They join us because they value the education benefit that they see we offer through our trainings and workshops and webinars that we now offer. We do assessments for our Main Street tier where we kind of go in and either do an internal or external assessment of their program to help guide their goals and objectives as they move forward. We assist them with their local planning efforts by assisting them with strategic planning or board retreats, community visioning, that type of work. Fundamentally, we serve as a resource center, a connector of information and sample documents, some of which we've put together ourselves. So when we hear of a particular challenge that is what we call an evergreen issue with our communities, then we might put together a publication like our donor guide, which now any community can pick up and figure out how to put together in 12 weeks a campaign to raise money in their local community. And we've done other types of those things. One of the really great things about delivering our services is we pull on our full heritage staff, which is super important because we have a very large network to staff ratio compared to other statewide Main Street coordinating programs. Our staff is very, very small. And so we really depend on both the skills and knowledge base of our other staff, as well as our partners, which we lean on quite a bit. For example, our survey folks were just in Tigard this week doing a reconnaissance level survey for one of our Main Street communities, and they'll be visiting Drain soon as well. Historic preservation, Joy Sears, our restoration specialist, does a lot of work with our Main Street communities as well. Not only our heritage staff too, but I got to call out our OPRD staff as well. The government team has been really helpful in guiding us through the rules making process this summer. Some of the other staff, Helena, facilitated our open door pitch panel at our conference last year and did an amazing job. Allison will be providing some training on volunteer engagement for our network communities. So we really greatly appreciate and value the support that we get. All of the work, all of the service that we do, it doesn't exist in a vacuum. We go through each year and update the strategic plan for Main Street, which is based upon looking at overarching goals for our preservation plan as well. And so this is what our current strategic plan looks. So all of the tools that we do is geared towards helping support some of this work. We identify what our goals and objectives are based upon those Mornings on Main call. We do quarterly reports and we track the information from that. We do check-in calls with their leadership team, and just fundamentally just listening and paying attention. So we pull all that information, identify what the key issues and opportunities are, and then we tweak and update our goals and objectives to guide our work as we move forward. And then last thing I'll mention before I move on to the Certified Local Government Program, I mentioned that we lean on partnering a lot. So we forged some really great partnerships with Travel Oregon, some other agencies. But one of the ones I wanted to highlight here, even though I was like struggling, I wanted to talk about a community, but because we have so many great transformation stories about some of our local communities. But it's through the work that we do, Rural Development Initiatives has been a really wonderful partner. A few years ago, we were finding one of the perennial issues that was coming up in our communities is really enhancing their economic vitality work to support their overall economic base and attracting the resources to be able to invest in their local properties and just enhance their sense of place. And we just didn't have the capacity to do the full scope of work that we wanted to be able to provide to our communities. We don't have a business development or economic vitality specialist as a position on staff. So we were trying to figure out how we can do that. And in conversation with RDI, I was just talking through some of the things as we do that we were having challenge, and they were like, hey, we can step forward. Let's figure this out. And so in partnership with RDI, they put together a full series of trainings that they offer to our Oregon Main Street Network. They were able to get a USDA RCDI grant to fund the work a couple of years. The first year, though, happened during the pandemic, and we just kind of built it out on the ground in partnership. But we really learned the importance when we deliver trainings regionally and bringing people together, that they then have that peer network that can form. You know, we've learned a lot about communicating through stories, the impact that we're having, and a lot of other things that RDI does in partnership with us through that training. So we value that. So we'll move on to the Certified Local Government Program. This one, Curry manages this, coordinates this particular program, but I love this program. And I always think that CLGs and Main Streets make a great partner. Sometimes when Curry is establishing a new or working with an existing and we don't have a Main Street organization, then it's our entree to encourage them to look at Main Streets. Conversely, when we have a Main Street and there isn't a certified local government, then it's our entree to kind of talk about that program. But what the CLG program is, it's really a federal program. Curry had mentioned that it's funded through SHPO, through the federal dollars that we receive on that side of thing for the grants. But while it's that federal program, we work communities to develop their own way of preserving the resources that are important to them. So establishing their own process for identifying what's historic, what has value to their community, and then how they want to designate or preserve or interpret some of those local resources. So those certified local government, when that's in place, that gives you this city-based program that can actually move forward those local preservation efforts. So it's pretty cool. Can I say cool? I don't know. Can I say cool? Awesome. So, well, they do have to meet certain criteria and qualifications to become certified that are established by the federal government. Curry makes that process as easily and smooth and painless as possible. But some of the benefits a local community can realize by being a participant in this program is really access to some of the resources that we have through our office or through the National Park Service. So they're able to tap into that expertise. Curry puts together some really amazing workshops and trainings. We just had one in Dallas that was joint opportunity with our Main Street organizations. There is an assessment process that's attached to that. And that's an opportunity to have some input to increase their effectiveness and impact at the local level. And then one of the great benefits is a non-competitive grant program that has been designed to really help support their local preservation efforts. Those grants are usually between the $5,000 and $20,000. In how we implement the certified local government, well, Curry is the coordinator. We do a team approach with that too. There's cross-bureau integration of the CLG check-in visits that happen. Once the grants are approved, there's cross-staff that are assigned to be a mentor for those different grantees and to nurture them along through it, make sure they're on track and have submitted the things that they need to be in compliance with the grant acknowledgements and those kinds of things. So And then, drawing on our team in terms of providing assistance with workshops and trainings as well. And then the last slide that I'll cover is we didn't have just one case study. I guess if it's one case study, it's the impact of the certified local government. What some of these programs have been able to achieve as a result. And a couple of them, the certified local governments were the ones that moved forward the designation of the downtown historic districts. Dallas was recently acknowledged this year. Portland has leveraged their certified local government to really look at expanding the types of properties that are listed on the National Register, and including a few that are noted up on the slide. Some have used them for pass-through grants, so maybe they wanted to do a matching facade grant or other kind of preservation work on a property. So they chose to use their non-competitive grant to put together their own local grants, and there's a few there that are listed. For example, there's a photo up there. Coos Bay used their pass-through grant for the Tioga sign repair. They also used 1 year of it for some repair work on their cemetery. The public engagement one, those are always kind of near and dear to my heart. So I love all the work that we do, but with the public engagement one, LeGrand 1 year, and I thought it was so wonderful. They did a design showcase for the public, but it was really geared towards the owners of property, contractors, and suppliers to really educate them about historic preservation and all of the techniques to the care and well-being of historic properties. So the event included some training on preservation techniques and appropriate materials to use when rehabbing so that we could get in front of people. And then Falls City, their current one is to work with their high school students to conduct interviews and to develop videos about historic sites, and then to hold a public event to show them to Falls Cities. They did a similar kind of interview program before, but it was about people, as I recall, some stories there. And then they showed it, and it was like movie night in town. Everybody came and ate popcorn and watched themselves up on the screen. I thought it was pretty cool. I just remember that one so vividly. We were all kind of like doing happy dances in the office. But yeah, so thanks.
Your questions, take a breath.
I'll add a comment. First, thanks to all of you. I know your names and we've communicated sometimes, and I apologize for not saying hi in person more often, but anyway, I appreciate very much what you do. And I just wanted to, again, celebrate the CLG program. At one point, the National Park Service asked me to oversee a project where we contacted the SHPOs and local governments in, I think, 27 states around the country, and asked them about where we started off this morning, talking about archaeological sites and archaeological preservation. We were out there standing freezing in Champoeg this morning and talking about archaeology subsurface. And we were asking local governments, what can you do? What do you do to protect archaeological resources in your community? And by far and away, the CLG participation was really the key ingredient that we found in the capacity of local governments to actually be able to understand, document, and commemorate in various ways the archaeological heritage as well, which is pretty cool because the options for local governments are often very limited. They can rely on state governments, but state governments often have their own, things that they're doing that day. And so local governments sometimes, especially those local governments that happen to have significant archaeological resources within their boundaries, are often left with very difficult decisions. How do you manage that? Do you assign staff? Do you, and it very often has slipped through the cracks over the years, but CLG participation is really the pathway that we see toward responsibly taking care of those things as well. So in some ways, we're talking about, main streets and so forth, but it really helps achieve all these other mandates that help with our obligations under SHPO and our relationships with the tribes and all kinds of other things we're trying to support. So I view it as really a powerful tool to achieve many good things all at once. So I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're going to continue on. I'm going to really quickly touch on the Historic Cemeteries program. This is a program that was established in the late 90s. It is a state designation. Any burial place that includes at least one burial of a person who died 75 years before today's date qualifies as a historic cemetery. So even if it is one burial, we have over 1,600 documented in our database of these cemeteries. I know that there are many more out there that we don't know about. Many are on private property. We have a commission of 7 volunteers from around the state, a good mix of expertise from archaeologists to genealogists to people operating cemeteries, because a big portion of these actually still operate and do burials. And so balancing the rules and laws around that is very interesting. We partner deeply with the Oregon Mortuary and Cemetery Board. So that's the agency that oversees those operating cemeteries and makes sure that they're doing the right thing by the people who are using their services. The Cemetery Association of Oregon and the Oregon Funeral Directors Association all have been really great partners with us in providing resources. We have a permit program that was introduced by the legislature in 2020. So we have a lot of cemeteries in the state that do not have an owner, or their owners cannot be accessed. And we can provide permits for people to access those cemeteries and care for them if that is the situation, so that they don't go uncared for. I just had a phone call with somebody today who's going to do that process. And we have had 4 since the legislation went into effect. One of those has since gained ownership of the cemetery for long term, which is very cool. We also have a grant program for this, which I will touch on when I hit grants.
I'm gonna take over for Cam here and hopefully do her proud. She's online.
No pressure.
And operating off of somebody else's slides, so we'll see how this goes. For the technical resources, networking, and training that our team does, we're gonna start with the conferences, summits, and deep dives. You can see there the 4 events that happen in one biennium. That's accurate.
Mhm.
So we divided it between even and odd years, again, looking at capacity, and specifically felt pretty intentional, and the need was there for those summits and deep dive. It's a single issue focus event to really be thoughtful about the issue we choose to go into. And, oh, sorry, thank you. And to really dive deep to try and have folks be in one room to talk about it, network again with each other, a common theme, which is through all those, you can imagine networking is key, and integrating all of these audiences that we serve to, again, coordinate, communicate, and leverage, again, some common words that we've used throughout this presentation. And we also have a fall workshop series that we are right in the middle of having, because it's still fall. And that typically, in our effort to make sure that we serve the entire state, we try hard with our fall workshop to have it in at least 4 to 5 different locations around the state. And this year was a little bit different. We offered some virtual opportunities and it's getting to some basics, collection care basics, and assessments. With our conferences, there's a whole list of what we value when we're making decisions about our conference, our summit, and our deep dive. I do want to say the pandemic is a moment where we made a switch with our summit to be virtual for access purposes. And it's kind of in perpetuity on purpose. So it's one of those weird silver linings when we're making decisions as a result of, well, I don't know, a pandemic. And let's see here. We I will say that one challenge has been the increased cost of services related to our conference and having to spend more time, energy to seek sponsorships to help support it in order to have the event that we would like to have that serves of the audience, the many audiences that we do try to bring together in one place and have those meaningful interactions and experiences and information downloads. Let's see, what else did Cam have here? So this is some feedback for that. I will say our upcoming summit, which Curry had mentioned in the very beginning, we're working with NAO, Nonprofit Association of Oregon, and it's really looking at a national trend that independent sector has discussed through a report, both quantitative and qualitative information about the retreat of influence. Nonprofits are mobilizing less, advocating less. Why is that? And we know that resources are limited and people needing to speak their needs in meaningful ways and make use of the mechanisms is important. So we're gonna take a look at that in the spring. If any of you want to join us, you're more than welcome, or spread the word to the communities that you serve. This is my other favorite child. Mentor Corps. This actually is a program that came out of issues and needs from that 2011 Oregon Heritage Vitality Study. And it's a statewide network of volunteers who have skills and abilities and in collection care, organizational capacity, management, nonprofit management, archives, training, and a wide variety of things. And it's providing some of those basic trainings and information, resources, guidance, prioritization, project planning to organizations across the state. And we really have served a wide variety of entities, organizations, efforts across the state. And we try hard to match them with mentors close to them. And if we can't, we do take staff and go out there. I've gone out to Union to make sure that we are equitable in how we're serving these organizations across the state. And blah, blah, blah. And here, some feedback. Oh, service distribution. There's a map. Thank you, Kim, of where we've, in the 24-25 year, who we've served and where. We have some excellent feedback from folks. And this is also a program where we were super intentional about evaluating it and looking at some of the challenges we have, the capacity we have, and totally doing a whole shift in the process. And it was the best decision we ever made. It's taking your ego out of it and really looking at the capacity that you have and how to make the biggest impact. It was a really good learning moment, I think, making that decision to do it. And we of course have numbers and data and we can provide that too in the interest of time if folks are interested. But you can see the types of support, organizations serviced, and oopsie, I thought there was one more slide here. I had a thought and it left my brain. So with that, oh no, it's later on. What was that?
That gets worse.
I mean, the kids steal it from me, I swear. So we do offer a lot of resources, studies, and reports that we have done. We talked a lot about those with the Oregon Heritage Commission section, but we have different varieties of reports. We have quick resources, which Curry alluded to in our communication slide a little bit earlier. And we have come out with some guides and some additional reports, highlight a couple that recently were released. We have the Addressing Harmful Content in Collections report, which is the intent was for Oregon Heritage Commission to understand the scope of harm and trauma and triggering that can occur to visitors, staff, and volunteers when engaging with records and collections and how they are addressing the harmful content that is in them. And it actually has, I think, larger implications than just collections, and especially in the work that we do and that is done across the state. We've created a guide to creating and cleaning up collection information, which has ties to Northwest Digital Heritage. You have objects, you have records, you have documents, but they are equally as important as the information attached to them about where they came from, when they were created, who they belong to. All of that is incredibly hard for organizations to get that information, and it is in a variety of packages when they get it, sometimes at the door of the heritage organizations when they show up at the day. So being able to get the information about the objects and be consistent with how they're collecting and documenting it is pretty critical. What's Up Downtown is an initiative for looking at second story in our downtowns. I'm missing a word. Activating, thank you. The second stories of the downtowns, and that's a compelling, it's a playbook, so it's another guide to look at. You know, our website has a lot of resources. Just going to say that out loud again. We do have a case study. This is the elusive thought I had that came back to me. So this kind of illustrates that purposeful shift in the process we do, where we had the period of assistance. A mentor was helping Willamina Historical Museum digitize their newspaper, and we shifted the period of assistance to be in line with grant cycles so that this mentor could help them identify the project, help review grant applications, and help them ultimately be successful in the goals that they're trying to achieve. And they were successful, and not only did they digitize the collection, but they also created a mechanism for folks to come in, or a specific place for them to come in and look through those digitized collections. So outreach was a part of it. It wasn't just straight digitization. It's broadcasting that this resource now exists for the community to come in and make use of. I'm apologizing to Cam. Hopefully I did her proud on this.
You did.
We back up 2 pages,
Two, you said?
2 slides.
This one?
So yeah, the guide to grading and cleaning up the collection information. Is that only available online? Do you have hard copies of it?
I'm actually going to be printing some hard copies in the next month and a half, and we'll clearly mail you one.
Okay, thanks.
All right, we are nearing the end. We are to the funding piece to the grant programs that we offer. We have many, but I'm going to focus on our 8 primary grant programs. I'm going to use this slide to kind of show you what you're looking at here. What I have done is provided the source of funding, so you know that, what entity, person, group does the approvals, how it was created, how often it's offered, how much can be awarded in each grant award, who can apply, and then kind of what it's for. So the Oregon Heritage Grant is our most broad grant category, and it's pretty cool because we only offer it once a biennium, but that gives the project more time. Our other grant programs have a pretty short grant cycle. It's about 9 months for them to complete work, and these projects are really broad and often involve partnership development, which takes time, or more complex projects. So we have some examples here of some Oregon Heritage grants that have been funded, but there are some other ones, and they are for any kind of nonprofit organization. So they don't necessarily have to have heritage as their organization or as their organizational purpose. So for example, Milagro Theater in Portland did an oral history project. So they're going to present that as a theater piece, but they were collecting the oral histories. So it's a really broad, cool program. It's a very challenging grant program to review, to be a reviewer on, because it's got a big variety, but it does some really great work. So spread the word on that one. That one will open next summer. The Oregon Museum Grant is one of our annual grant programs. This is under the Oregon Heritage Commission. Was created by statute. It has 3 primary funding areas in tourism, heritage tourism, collections care, and education and interpretation. This is kind of a nice one because It can fund things that Katie and I love, which is like the basics of life, like HVAC for collections and boxes for collections, which those aren't usually like the sexy thing that other grant funders want to pay for, but they're like critical to do the job of a museum. So we see a lot of those come through for us.
What's the total amount annually?
For the museum grant program, annually it is only 75,000. So we have small amounts, but they go far. For the Oregon Historic Cemeteries grant, this is another annual grant. We have about 62,000 to award in this, and that supplements, the lottery is supplemented by that MEDAC trust. That's a private trust. That person wanted to give funding to cemeteries in Oregon and in Kentucky. It's based in Minnesota, I think. We don't know why, but they were like, hey, we're supposed to give this money out and it would take all of the money we have to award to manage that. Can we just give it to you to give away? And we said yes. So we've been doing that for a long time now. It's been, I don't know, years. So this can fund work for the preservation of designated historic cemeteries in the state. So again, really broad. We do a lot of monument repair, but we also do interpretive work, community engagement. When you get the community loving these places, they take care of them for the long run. The Diamonds in the Rough grant is, well, it's not really new anymore, but it's been around for the least time of all of these except for the Main Street Revitalization Grant. This is to bring back lost historic character of historic properties. I love this program because it is sexy. The before and afters are always amazing and cool. It is woefully underfunded. We only have $100,000 a year for this one, and $20,000 in construction does not go very far anymore. But we do get 3 to 5 really cool projects every year. The Preserving Oregon grant is another annual one. This and Diamonds in the Rough is approved by the State Advisory Committee for Historic Preservation. And this grant program has about $250,000 a year. Again, $20,000 is not going quite as far as it used to, so we're still making work happen, but it can fund archaeology projects or projects to preserve properties listed on the National Register of Historic Places. And then we have the Oregon Main Street Revitalization Grant, which was approved by or created by the legislature in 2015. We started funding in 2017. We have consistently received funding for this program, and for this cycle, we have $10 million to award. So we have some money in this one. And so for this cycle, it can award up to $400,000 per as an award. The applicant has to be the Main Street organization. So when Sherry was talking about how hard we've worked to make that program accessible to people, partly it's so that people can access these pretty powerful grant programs and chunks of money to move this work forward. The other thing that's really cool about this, though, is that it works great for smaller projects too. So we'll see communities like Reedsport, for example, applies for multiple buildings to have work done in the same project. So they might have $30,000 or $40,000 projects, but they get 5 properties in one and get the grant for that. So it's really cool to see the transformation that this funding can do in the local communities. And then the Certified Local Government Grant is tied to the program that Sherry described. It is non-competitive, which is really cool. That award range is wrong. I totally did not update that. It's more like $15,000. Missed that. But it's that cool. The cool thing about it being non-competitive, I think, is really nice because the cities can count on it and they know that every other year they have this funding and they can sort of plan long-term projects like Dallas, who did their downtown historic district. in the first grant cycle, they did the survey work. In the second grant cycle, they did the public engagement and outreach to make sure the community really wanted to have a district. And then in the third grant cycle, they did the district. So that was a really strong way to bring the community along and know that if they started here, they could end with that district nomination. And then we have the Veterans and War Memorials Grant. You all are the approvers for this, actually. This is part of the local government grant funding that you've heard about from Michelle's team. We have this chunk for Veterans and War Memorials. It can be for repair or development of these memorials. And we have $300,000 a biennium for that. It's not highly competitive. The applicant needs to be a local government and it has to be on private property. But definitely keep in mind the repair piece too, because I think a lot of people don't think of that. They think of it for the development, but not so much the preservation.
Curry, it has to be on private property?
Did I say private? Public. I'm sorry. It has to be on public property. So sorry. Local government applying for private public. So I just wanted to share one example of a community who has, and I think I'm going to send this to this city because I want to challenge them to use the other two programs that they have not yet used. But they have received, the City of Independence has used 6 of our 8 programs. They've received 14 grants, over $500,000 awarded to that community. The city has been the applicant. The museum, which is under the city, has received funding in a couple of grants. They've done public history work and historic property preservation work. So they've had a big impact when they take all of the pieces, participating in Main Street, being a certified local government, showing up for our conferences, hosting our Main Street conference. So a lot can happen when they delve into all of the resources we have to offer. And that is finally it.
Questions? Yes. Or thoughts or comments?
How about
Thanks.
Minville? I just took a tour of the MAP project that you guys offered some funding to. Are you familiar with it?
Or am
The
I
map
familiar with it?
In
Yes.
McMinnville.
Yes.
As McMinnville, are they part of the Main Street? Were they one of the early ones? Because boy, they're a long ways away, a long ways down the road. Is it?
Yeah, so I call this Oregon Main Street 2.0. There was a prior version and then they had lost their association, but McMinnville has had ongoing downtown efforts for a very long period of time. They're one of our top tier communities. That's just in town.
I guess I bring it up because mostly what we see are those in process. And McMinnville is, I guess, all grown up in this now, and it's totally transformative. I think I had not toured it before, and I was just like blown away because they started like everybody else with, let's make our downtown walkable or something like that. And I guess as we look at all these things in process, it's kind of fun to see what happens at the end when you have this just booming, self-perpetuating thing, which we're trying to get to. You could go work with Sherry. I mean, I was just like, oh, it's not. This is what.
It's really cool when you watch one, it becomes so contagious. That it's really cool to watch community revitalize.
That's what they say about, when I listen to the other side of the shop, building restoration, like they get, property owners get competitive, like you might have somebody who's like, no, 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 and then they see the neighbor and they're like, oh, wait a minute.
I toured with the new developer, this McMinnville Theater, that you guys gave some money compared to what they're gonna invest in. And it's just breathtaking, the scope of it, with just a little seed money. The scope of it. I mean, your piece, but because of the whole picture, the big investors are coming in and spending bazillion bucks to make a huge new hotel.
So the other thing that I really like about the way you guys, all these programs approach things. Over and over, I've watched in our little community, people come in to fix us. All the way up to Bundy came in to fix us.
How'd they do?
They didn't do well. And yours is one that brings the community along and asks the community, do you want to do this? And if so, here's what you need to do. And kudos to you for that. It helps.
Nice job.
Hey, Steve, how does that certified local government program interface with Oregon land use law? I was gonna ask you, I think you'd love to go.
It's not, I mean, it's
What about the historic district?
National Historic Preservation Act, it's sort of
Yeah.
the CLG's start, so I don't, I mean, it has goals, 5, well,
I've always wondered, cause like, there's that,
well, you just asking for Coos Bay, cause I mean, you see it in each slide.
I never
See
saw
that
it.
picture in every slide. Yeah.
Just a curiosity, I was thinking about, I got stuck on the historic.
Oh my
preservation
gosh,
law
it's a
because
little.
The DLCD. And. Sure, honor, that's what I meant to say. And so.
And it's the afternoon. And then you have two executives sitting here that realized Monday morning that we were presenting this topic and.
So you're really prepared.
Yeah, and I think I think he left at like 5 o'clock after basketball last night, got in at like midnight, and I was at the hospital with parents until about midnight. So we got this. Anyway, so we just wanted to, so we were hoping that Allison was going to be able to be here to talk about this, but she's in Texas at an interpretive conference and has really spotted coverage. So we're gonna wing it. So I just wanted to set the tone a little bit here with this work before we get into the conversation. And we do have a pretty presentation, but there's a couple of you that are newer, a couple of you have been around longer.
All right. Lisa, hey, guy, everybody in the back, can we kind of keep it down? We're having a hard time hearing. Thank you. Go ahead.
And so I just wanted to do a little bit of just a little bit of background first, because we've been talking about whether you call it DEI, whether you call it welcoming, we've called it engage, relate, and adapt. I think we've adapted the acronyms about 5 times since I've been the director. And that's just because there is really no playbook. There is really no agreement on what diversity, equity, and inclusion means. And It's just, to me, it's like, how do we advance our welcoming work and how do we make people feel more welcome, whether it's our staff or our visitors or our volunteers? And so we're gonna keep focusing in on that. And so I just wanted to spend a couple of minutes here talking about the welcoming work timeline. So in 2014, I became the director, and one, being the female was the most important thing about being the director. But number two, I said my number one priority was making our parks more welcoming. And it was immediately this touchy-feely, what do you mean? What does that mean? Right? And I was like, well, they're not necessarily welcoming for everyone, right? And I want to make sure as we move forward that they are, and that we do. When you look at our overnight visitors, it's a very, probably 90% white population for overnight camping. And when you look at Oregon demographics, that's really not what's coming up. And so are we actually having the conversation around what is our customer base going to look like? And are they going to adopt to those things that we actually need the revenue for? So a couple things way before me, legislatively, maybe Commissioner Berger did this, I don't know, but we have legislative mandates and statutes that we waive fees for foster, adoptive, and veteran families. Wasn't you? Okay.
Sure, I didn't vote against them.
But I just want to make sure, because we keep talking about we need to be waiving more fees, we need to make things more accessible. We're debating between, Chris Havel left the room, and the numbers we have, but we know it's over $1 million a year that we waive fees for at least those three. And then as a director, I have the ability to waive for other programs, which we do quite regularly, especially in things that we want to pilot. We also have the statewide comprehensive outdoor recreation plan that really identifies statewide outdoor recreation goals, but it's really, there's a lot of conversation, but it's really focused on the Land and Water Conservation Fund, which is like this big in our world, but it does give us a good glimpse of things there that we want to be focusing in on. So that 2014, when I became the director, we created a diversity, equity, inclusion committee and started trying to figure out like, how are we gonna work on this? So what does this look like? And it became very clear that it was a lot of emotion and a lot of ideas, but really no clear journey. And we were like, okay, let's pull this back and let's call this engaging, relating, and adapting. How do we actually engage with each other? And how do we actually relate for a different perspective? And then how do we adapt our business services or our customer services or our professional workplace? So we created this ambassador program and had about 17 ambassadors across the agency. There were employees that would literally hold meetings with other employees on their teams and talk about things like unconscious bias, and just that way the agency was advancing all together at the same time. And what we've learned over time is that there is no playbook. This is practice. We practice, we practice, we practice, and the world shifts constantly, and we continue to practice. So we've piloted things like the governor's campouts. Anybody remember coming to any of those? We did that. We focused primarily, we used non-traditional camping spaces that were closer to population. So we used Willamette Mission, doesn't have overnight camping, but it allowed us to bring families from the Marion County, Woodburn, Salem, West Salem, and folks that traditionally didn't come outdoors. And we partnered with Fish and Wildlife and brought folks, kiddos could kayak for the first time. Many of them rode a bike for the first time. They were able to fish in the little lake there for the first time. And we tried that with different communities that generally don't come out to camp, just to see like, this is what it's like to set up a tent. This is what it's like to cook outdoors. So we piloted that for 4 or 5 years, I think. Didn't see a lot of return where folks were coming back to camp after that. They loved the experience, a lot more day use activity, but not necessarily overnight. At the time, we had a nonprofit partner with the Oregon State Park Foundation. So we did the Ticket to Ride program. So we did that for many years. I think they're still doing that, but it's with all different park providers. We piloted a Park Explorer program where people would have access, different communities would have access to cabins and yurts to get out and see if maybe that was an easier way to get out into the outside and see if you could spend the night that way without all the gear. We brought in, some of you remember Slater Smith. He was a young musician who did the Over Oregon song, and then he brought us a bunch of like indie bands from Portland, and we thought maybe we could reach some millennials and others they had concerts at Vista House and I don't remember where, basement at Thompson's Mills. They were all over, which was really kind of fun and a different way to do some different things. And then we started partnering with the Oregon Spinal Cord Injury Connection. So we really started focusing in on the ADA community. So you heard today from the tribe that if you make things more accessible for one, it does for all, right? So I think of curb cuts, we put them in for people with wheelchairs, but anybody who's ever pushed a stroller or lately a walker or a wheelchair, right? All those things are super important, right? But what we did is we brought them out and we actually had, because we think we're ADA accessible because we've met the federal guidelines. And so we had staff actually spend time in the park. Some of them got into wheelchairs and experienced what it was like to try to make the grade to get to a restroom that's accessible. Rather than me saying how the experience went, I think we'll do the first video because it's, to me, it's the moment of like, okay, like this helps you understand some of the work that we're trying to accomplish here. This would be a test because they didn't know until we got here they were going to be playing videos with sound for us. So.
What is my relationship with the outdoors? See, I mean, I grew up camping. It was something that our family did together, and so there's a lot of memories that just kind of get rooted in that.
Yeah, so I've always been a big outdoorsman, you know, hiking, camping, fishing, hunting.
You know, it's like the sanctuary, you know, it's when I get really stressed and life is overwhelming, you can just go outside.
Getting that fresh air and that wind in your face and
Just the stress release of experiencing nature, its beauty and the birds. It's visceral. I can feel my stress drop when I'm in nature.
I love being outdoors. I don't get the opportunity to do it as much as I'd like to. We're supposed to be the outdoor capital of the world, pretty much in the Pacific Northwest. And when you're in a wheelchair, it's not. It's not.
The injury made things just more difficult.
My wife complains sometimes because she's like, I have to do everything. I have to set up the tent. I'm your Sherpa, you know.
I mean, there's a lot more planning. You know, you can't, like, I can't wake up in the morning and just be like, hey, I'm just gonna go camping.
for me, I would just have to say I need power for my power chair. That's like a big one, and then hard pack ground.
Someone like me, they don't really access the outdoors as much, so there's a lot of things that I have to learn and that I haven't learned yet.
Then, you know, there's additional equipment and stuff like that.
My experience of the outdoors after my spinal cord injury has just been one of honestly kind of disappointment. I used to be an avid hiker, backcountry hiker with some college buddies, and it's been 5 years since my spinal cord injury and I haven't been able to join them.
I think a lot of people crave it. They write it off as that's something they can't do, and it's really sad. I think the barriers that a lot of people experience in accessing outdoors are really just kind of the way society views it, and they're kind of told they can't access it. And the fact they don't see other people out there doing it, it's like, is this perception that they're not capable anymore just because they have a physical difference, disability.
I miss being able to be outdoors and have that experience. So coordinating with the Oregon State Parks Department and Adventures Without Limits, this event is kind of has a short-term impact, helping people get outdoors.
I came out to, I mean, obviously do some kayaking, some camping, sort of meet like-minded people, you know, people with a disability that are, you know, outdoorsy.
It was nice in the sense that I didn't have to worry about making sure things were accessible because they had scoped it out already. It's all taken care of.
This weekend we had people out here with their partners, spouses, kids even, and so it just makes the inclusion aspect of this event really, I think, really significant.
Well, I mean, I have 2 kids and I want to be able to say, hey, let's go to the park and put a tent or something.
This is like I want my kids to be involved, and you see, you know, how people, somebody in a wheelchair beside their dad, and there's like a community of people with disability out there. So they, kind of a mingle and bond, so they can get more understanding of the wheelchair. I thought I never can be able to do it, but you know, with the help of others, and you know, have more confidence and encouragement from other people who have the same disability as mine, if they can do it, I can do it.
And when I go camping, I'm like a wild, rare animal at the campsite. Like I am typically the only wheelchair user in a campground.
And being able to be with other people who face the same challenges, it took a weight off of my shoulders personally, knowing that I wasn't alone.
Nurture into the soul. I loved it.
Other than like losing a part of my function, I also feel like I've lost a part of my life. And it's hard to share that with Courtney. I imagine it's gonna be hard for me to share that with kids, you know, with my kids, my children. Learning in a environment like this with other people, watching other people with their kids camp, it gives me hope. And I think it helps us realize that while it's different than what I thought it was gonna be, it's still just as great. There are multiple organizations that came together to make this happen. Adventures Without Limits did all the heavy lifting in regards to logistics. And Oregon State Parks Department gave us great access and made really incredible modifications to the site.
It was cool to see a park that had accessible features and that, you know, was a little different, and I could really imagine myself doing it more independently, you know, if I wanted to come out on my own. I was like, oh, that exists.
We had a large group conversation around a campfire about this with people that have mobility impairments.
The feedback that I heard today was very informative, and it's going to help to inform policy and decision making. We're already spearheading our, you know, mantra of being a welcoming environment. And this just goes above and beyond the scope of welcome. This is making sure that the park is accessible for all. I am humbled to think that people were super grateful for the experience when it's something that so many of us take for granted. That it's just so easy to come out and enjoy the outdoors. And there's so many people that just don't have that same opportunity because of barriers.
If it weren't for certain organizations like AWL and Oregon State Parks, and, you know, Oregon Health, and to help me get outdoors, it wouldn't be possible.
It's great that there's people that actually give, or there's actually people that care about trying to make these places more accessible. Like there's people working on it.
I hope that this activity, this event, can bring a cohesion among the stakeholders who are interested in this to make those health benefits and just enjoyment of the outdoors available to everybody. And Oregon is, I mean, it's amazing. Oregon has amazing natural areas, and I think it could become like the place to come into the United States that's completely accessible. It has amazing infrastructure and programs for inclusion.
Is taking things in Oregon where they should be. It's the next step that we should all be taking, is making everything inclusive.
We've used that kind of for every community that we meet with. A campfire brings a whole different conversation.
We're gonna get started. Hello, everyone, and good afternoon.
So we kind of use that as our engage, relate, and adapt. We can engage with the community, you know, depending on what it is, and then we can relate to what the concerns are, hear the potential barriers rather than assuming them, because we used to do things like the Let's Go program. We like, let's go camping, let's go kayaking. And it was like us telling people what to go do. It's like, why don't we sit down and actually learn and listen and engage and relate and then adapt whatever that might look like. So this was just a really great example to show you, like, this is how we're approaching this work. From there, you've seen Helena's in there. You've heard from Helena several times. We have an ADA coordinator. She's also our tribal relations coordinator. Which are new for us in the last several years. And we have the accessibility design standards now for any future projects that we do. So it'll help inform, but simple things here were like, we have ADA accessible picnic tables. It's for one wheelchair. And they were like, oh, and so we're thinking, you know, all this money we're gonna have to spend to be more accessible. And they're like, take the screws out and we can get up to the table. It's just little things, or like take the rugs out of the bathroom. And it's like, you don't have an adult changing station. just little things that we're like, oh, we can fix that. And it was very simple to adjust little things to make it more accessible for people. And so you guys all approved the tribal relations policy. So, you can see these things are all kind of weaving in and they're there. It's just, I just want to make sure that you knew that there's other work happening there. We have looked at all of our grant programs to see if there's any way that we can be more welcoming and to make sure the criteria is in there. You heard that even here in the Heritage grants today, we added tribes to all of our grants that we legally could. I think there was the local government grant program is about the only one statutorily we still can't, but everything else I think we've adjusted. You guys helped us last year get the ability to transfer land to tribes, which we thought we had the legal authority to do, only counties did, but and then we have been partnering with many organizations and, like I said, practicing piloting. And one of them is called Black Folks Camp 2. Earl B. Hunter Jr., I don't know if any of you had the privilege of getting to meet him when he was here for our December All Manager meeting. You would know it because he's got some energy, you never forget it. But we'll go ahead and play that second video. The thing that we loved about the Black Folks Camp 2, and feel free to start. Oh, cool. Maybe.
Tell folks, one of the reasons why the majority or many Black folks have not visited state parks or explored the outdoor lifestyle or explored the outdoor industry is because of generational fear. Many Black folks, particularly my great-grandmother, saw lynchings, saw crosses being burned, saw things in those woods that made them never want to go in those woods again, and they did not want their children to go in those woods. Those woods represented one of the most heinous places for Black folks, where most folks view the outdoors as rest and relaxation. Many Black folks view the outdoors and the outdoor lifestyles as recklessness. Not only do many Black folks have generational fears, but some of us are scared of some of the same things that you are. Wild animals, poisonous plants, bugs, snakes, and all those things. Lack of knowledge. Lack of knowledge is another fear to keep folks out of the outdoors. No matter what you do, the more you know, the more you'll do. And right now, there are many Black folks, or people of color out there that have no clue on what happens at state parks, the activities and the things they can do to be better mentally, physically, emotionally, and all that jazz. Many of you may feel that setting up camp is really easy, simple. Some of you may think starting a campfire is easy as well. A lot of you don't know, though. You have to have knowledge to make sure that you're doing it right, you're doing it on purpose. And that's one of the reasons why many Black folks have never really experienced the outdoor lifestyle, particularly state parks, because of that fear and that lack of knowledge. Because of that fear, because of that lack of knowledge, we don't have the base in regards to how to enjoy the outdoor lifestyle. And that is an issue, not only for you, not only for me, but also for state parks. Black folks are arguably some of the most athletic people in the world. Yet many of you know you haven't seen us mountain biking, trail running. So why we haven't seen many Black folks in the outdoors and enjoying state parks? Quite simply, we've never really been invited. As a matter of fact, listen, Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts never came to my school. They never asked me to go into the outdoors. I never experienced the outdoors as a youngster. And we all know experiencing the outdoors as a youngster, particularly with your parents, will give you more knowledge so you can experience it as an adult. Even after many parks are desegregated after 1964, folks of color, Black folks, didn't really know what to do, how to get there, and really was never invited to enjoy these state parks. You may or may not know that Black folks experience heart disease and diabetes more than any other race in this country. We believe that the outdoors can help tame that. We believe that if more Black folks get in the outdoors, particularly state parks, and enjoy themselves, we believe that those numbers would actually drop because they're having physical activities in the parks that we all love. We all pay for 640 million acres of public land. We want to make sure that more Black folks are enjoying state parks and enjoying the lands that they actually pay for. Because at the end of the day, nature is nonpartisan and it does not discriminate against your race, your age, your gender, or your class.
Earl could go on for hours and hours and hours, but the thing that we really loved about practicing here with Earl is it was the first time that we actually had somebody who was focusing on state parks and the outdoors and recreation, because everything else gets harder and harder to like integrate into what we do and how we do it. And it's very serious, right? But he also makes it very clear, like there's there's reasons historically we don't, but we want to, and we want to be invited. We want to have conversations and we want to help educate. And his business originally founded out more around Black folks, but he really now is like everyone. Like he's recognized like this isn't about a particular race. It's not about a particular sexual orientation, a particular gender. It's like everyone may have some reason they don't want to go outdoors. And how do we, his big thing is unity around the campfire. So I just wanted to highlight a couple of the things that we've been working on. Since we started this work, under Governor Brown, there were DEI coordinator positions created for 17 or so state agencies. And so as part of that, now there are DEI plans that need to be adopted. We are proud to announce that our BEE, Belonging, Equity and Engagement plan has been adopted by DAS. We have an action plan that we are going to continue to be working on towards those goals. And our welcoming statement, but Jared's going to go over those pieces with you here in a minute. And so I think we'll just highlight over to the welcoming work with the B plan if you want to open up that presentation. And I'll turn this part over to JR, but I just want to make sure you guys knew kind of the background, because I know for a few of you, this is brand new and you're like, I don't even know what you guys have been doing, but there's been good practice, good work, and happy to answer questions about that before we go into where we're heading with our B work. None?
I'll just say, I'm glad to hear that you're looking at your programs and making sure that, that this is the basis of everything you do.
Mhm.
I think I've seen DEI done many different ways. And I think it's the most successful when we really just make it part of what we do and not a special set aside.
Yeah, I think the bigger challenge has been like DEI has not actually truly been defined, and there isn't actually a universal goal. Like what exactly does that mean? And so, practice, practice, practice. I feel like we're now at this place that we can internalize it and bring it into everything that we do. And it'll be much easier to talk about what we're doing and how other programs, including financial services, how they can connect to it, right? So we're going to focus a little bit more on the how we're going to do it, because I feel like what's happened is we have folks that want to come in and help with DEI, if you will, but there's no program, there's no structure, and trying to figure out how to structure it. So now we're going to structure what we want to do and then talk about how we're going to implement those strategies. Is it up?
Yeah,
Yay.
perfect.
Okay.
Thanks, Lisa. So I'm going to talk a little bit kind of about where we're going and some of the work we're doing right now. And as Lisa said, I'll kind of bounce around terms a little bit in the way of DEI, the DEI coordinator positions. We've been using more of the acronym of B, the Belonging, Equity, Engagement. You may hear welcoming statements or welcoming. And so those three kind of terms are a little bit interchangeable, and you'll kind of see them referenced as we go through this document and of kind of talking about what we're doing. And as Lisa had mentioned, DEI coordinator positions were allocated or established in several agencies. Ours became vacant earlier in this year, and it just kind of gave us kind of an opportunity to reevaluate how we were delivering that service in the agency and how we structured that program within the agency. And so one of the things we did, and you may have heard her mention earlier in the heritage conversation, but Allison Watson, who is our volunteer coordinator and interpretive coordinator for the agency, we asked her to step into a rotation and become the DEI program coordinator. That rotation stepping into a manager role. And I'm going to actually show a little bit of detail about what that division that she's now going to be leading is, but really looking at it a different way as how do we more effectively integrate it into the agency as opposed to considering a standalone initiative. And so a lot of what I'm going to show you this afternoon is our current work. It's work that she's been doing, that she's already done. This has just been probably about the last month or so that she's been in this role. She's phenomenally organized and has done a ton of work already. So you're going to see a lot of that presentation. As Lisa mentioned, she's down in Texas, so you get the backup presenter in me. But I'll do my best to represent what we're doing. So Allison currently works under me in statewide operations and serves that. So a lot of this work you'll see in the team kind of is based in statewide operations, but as you heard in the earlier presentation, that division still does work for the whole agency for those supportive functions. So really going through some of these things, we're going to talk a little bit about the difference of what has come from either DAS or the state of Oregon, and then how we integrate that in with the agency. So a couple different things here that you'll see that DAS has asked for is a strategic plan, a DEI plan, and an affirmative action plan. Those plans are meant to build off each other and be interrelated. As far as the strategic plan goes, this talks about kind of our focuses, and don't worry, I'm not going to read all those tiny little letters. So
They're the wise goals.
we left them left all this in here, especially if there's questions that we can come back to. But I'll just kind of hit the high points. The executive team has developed what we consider our wise goals, and so that's centered around welcoming, investing in our staff, service delivery, delivering our business, and then evolution, being willing to change. So that's really what we're working on as far as our strategic plan in this regard, and how it integrates into the DEI plan. And so the DEI plan is centered around implementing targeted universalism. And so that's where we establish specific goals that for the groups that we're trying to focus on. And so as it says in here, OPRD's DEI plan will focus on operationalizing targeted universalism, as well as clarifying the role of the B coordinator in how they support that strategy. In addition, we're working on an affirmative action plan. This is one of the newer things that has been asked to be submitted, and how we develop a affirmative action coordinator as well. It sounds like that we're also that function will be served by either Allison in her role or the DEI coordinator once we fill that position. Talks about how we'll integrate there, and it's directed by the universal goals, addresses position roles and the specific targeted approaches that we have listed up here. The universal goals that we're focusing on, at least right now, are centered around two simple concepts. And one is around access, making sure that everyone has access to their state parks and to all the agency programs that we have offered. And the other one is belonging, and making sure that we create an inclusive environment where people feel they belong in OPRD as staff, but also that they feel welcome and a sense of belonging in their parks as a visitor. We're going to do that kind of through two different phases here. It's really about focusing on targeted approaches, and the targeted approaches are split again. So we're going to have kind of what we're calling agency initiatives, and those are going to be large programmatic initiatives that the agency takes on. Large systems or large kind of ideas. Lisa had mentioned earlier the Park Explorer program, or things that are targeted as an agency level program. We also want to drill down and have unit level initiatives that allow for more targeted approaches regionally or park specific. Examples of park units that may be in close proximity to a tribal reservation or a certain type of population, that we could actually do targeted work with those groups as opposed to just focusing on these larger agency things. So kind of doing both plans concurrently. In those agency level targeted approaches, the outcome is that we'll identify the initiatives to resource and implement to achieve those agency universal goals. And as we go through and identify those, the initiatives will be implemented, resourced, and evaluated. It's the idea of we'll start to refine that and come up with what is all the important ideas or great ideas, and then refine those down to what can we actually focus on. We'll collect those proposed initiatives, prioritize them with input, and then implement those targeted strategies, and then evaluate those targeted strategies periodically to make sure that we're meeting the goals, or if we need to reevaluate or readjust. This will be done through a series of the B coordinator, the DEI coordinator, the engagement team, the executive team, and then some work groups that Allison expect to work on the process.
And one of the key things we are shifting here is these will be work groups focused on the thing, not a committee, because we feel like we committee things to death sometimes. Maybe nobody else does, but
Yeah.
it'll be work group and it'll be focused specifically on the things that we want to work on.
And that's a great point because
And then they go away.
previously,
and then new people get to come in and work on things.
yeah. Previously, for a while, we had a committee that was a standing committee, and what we found was people were, I wouldn't say fighting because it wasn't necessarily negative, but people all had different ideas, and so it was like there was a lot of spinning without a lot of action. Where these are going to be initiatives that are decided upon with input, and then staffed, and the work group will be convened to cover that specific topic or project, and then they will be released back and then and then maybe reconvene to evaluate, but that it'll give it more chance for more people to be involved and have a say in it, and also keep that passion and interest with people because they're doing the things that they're interested in.
Commissioner Berger.
Yeah. I applaud this. I've had it with meetings. But the problem with that approach, and you got to it at the end, is one and done. And that doesn't get us there. One and done doesn't get us there.
No.
Well, this was a great initiative. We did that. Okay, we're done.
Yeah, it depends on the initiative, because if it gets embedded into what we do, like the
That's-
grants programs is a great example. Like we had to get it going, but now it's just part of our DNA,
Yeah,
right?
so-
Like, so
so-
we're hoping the things we pick will be those things, not like, let's do some flashy big something, right? Like
Yeah.
it's,
I'm gonna ask about the
Mhm.
video. It's the second time I've seen it.
Mhm.
Have we had more opportunities for people?
we
who
have
want
had
to?
more, yeah.
Videos, but if it's one and done.
Yeah.
No, thankfully Helena keeps us going on that one.
Yeah, specifically that group, that Adventures Without Limits group is one that we've still partnered with every year. We've actually kind of stalled some of the project around Park Explorers to make sure that it was being effective. Even in that interim, we've stayed partnered with Adventures Without Limits, and they're I believe last year they were in 6 different properties with 6 different groups.
Yeah. And they need very little from us anymore.
And they've already put their request in.
Exactly. We want those return. Yeah. Because man, putting on those weekend events is a lot.
We don't do a video each time. so
No.
that-
We have to use the one we have. We're on low budget. You'll hear about that tomorrow.
So this talks about, so that prior one was about agency targeted approach. This is more focused around the unit level targeted approaches, how those will be identified by the unit managers, what they want to do, come up with ideas, and then once they will be evaluated, then if they're implemented, staffed and evaluated, how they kind of use those resources. So really the idea is, to your point, Commissioner Berger, is it's not one and done. The idea is it important? Are we evaluating it? Are we checking if it's working? And if it's working, we continue doing it. If it's not, we adjust and go to another initiative.
We're learning a lot.
I guess to that point, do we have like a system for how we're tracking data? Like, are we tracking data? Are we going into some of these like inner city schools to be like, who all has been to a park? Why haven't you been to? So, I mean, I think that's
Corp
the
is
other
probably the
piece.
most accurate.
Yeah.
Corp, which is done every 5 years, would probably be the most accurate metric we use right now to see. But it's a slow moving target in all honesty. This is one where it can be challenging it's a little bit of a leap of faith of we're going to do it with the best information we have, but we're talking in the future. We're trying to, reach folks generally, when we're reaching the youth and whatever, we won't see the result of that for years down the road, but it's really hard because again,
there's no playbook.
Yeah. As Lisa mentioned, I think she covered a lot of these already as some of the targeted approaches that we've already are currently working on or have already been working on. The Black Folks Camp 2 group That was a foundational course that we just offered. Earl had come out, was last December and spoke
our
at the
keynote,
managers
yeah.
meeting. We offered Earl B. Hunter.
He was in the video.
guy-
He's from North Carolina, and he just created Black Folks Camp 2 3 years ago. He played football. He worked in the RV industry and saw this big
He's
gap
not a
in
local
business.
guy.
Not a local guy at all. No, we met him through our national association because he's the first one that we've actually had somebody focus on state parks, like, because everything else is much broader, right? And so it's like, let's talk about the access and the entry to state parks.
Yeah.
He's pretty dynamic.
That was mild.
Yeah. Yeah. Got a lot of energy.
Yeah, if you give him a room.
And yeah, so that's his organization is Black Folks Camp 2, centered around that, what he calls the Unity Blaze, which is bringing everybody around the campfire.
That's
So he came and spoke to our managers in December. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I've got something I'd like to say, and I'm probably gonna cross a line here, but the Black Folks Camp 2, as being Black and being someone who's used the Oregon State Parks for over 50 years, I would almost disagree with about 90% of what he said.
Yeah.
I really would. Maybe in North Carolina it is that way. I don't know, but it's surely not in this state. And if this is something that we want, a video we want to show to your folks, Lisa, maybe we need to talk to some Black folks who do camp in this state and get their perspective.
So we have, and here's the thing about categorizing people. We're humans and we all have different perspectives and experiences. And so you say that, but another Black person in Oregon has a complete different experience, right? So it's let's give it all out there. And if it resonates with someone, great, right? In particular for Black folks, right? Like when he says two, he just means also, like it's like he's camped, he was in the RV industry, he does, but we say things like, well, people of color don't come out because they don't have the money, they don't have the gear, they don't have the ability to store it. And it's all these things that are made up that aren't necessarily always identified for every person in a category, right? And so his point is, like, it's not all those barriers. Like, hey, look at my shoes. Do you know what those cost? You know what the car I drive costs? Like, I have an RV that's $500,000, right? Like, all of those things are real and true for him, but he also knows that within his communities, within our own communities here in Oregon, people feel that way across the country. Doesn't mean all Black people feel that way. Doesn't mean all Hispanic people feel that way, right? But it is an opportunity. And in particular for Black folks, there is a lot of historical things that would say, don't go in the woods, right? And it's another way to talk about those things without.
Right. I just want to be
I
careful
know.
not to teach one side too strong. And there's two sides to every story. We know that. And if you're training your
Or
folks and you're
10,000
teaching your
sides
folks,
to every
let's
story.
teach both sides. So they
Yeah.
can be-
Yeah, I think I think it's a great point, but I would also say I know across the country, state parks systems have identified, and Oregon fits these statistics as well, which is the demographics using state parks do not match the demographics of the state of Oregon, and that's what we're trying to address is really there. Even though it's the right thing to do, there's also a self-serving side of that, which is we'll lose relevancy if we aren't matching the demographics of the state. And that statistic applies all across the country where folks statistically, especially Black folks, are not camping at the same rate that other individuals are. And so trying to pull at what are those reasons. And Earl, while he may not be 100%, I think his perspective does resonate with a lot of people. And so I do think it's definitely a balanced approach, but his is a perspective that I think is shared by a lot of folks and what we're seeing around the country with our partners.
Yeah, and in particular, when you look at our overnight demographics, it's over 90% white. And when you take Oregon's demographics that are coming into the future and current, we're going to be out of business in 10 years. That's what I'm saying. And Black population is really small compared to Hispanic, Latinx, Russian, right? And we're also seeing that those communities also don't want to do overnight necessarily. Day use, larger places to congregate, all those kinds of things. So we have to do a better job of helping folks.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, day use reflects totally different. Yeah.
Lisa, is there a desire on their part? I mean, that's part of it. And I'm not, we've talked through 10 segments of our demographics, but
So that-
honestly, I think we leave out seniors as we're talking.
Oh,
I-
absolutely. It's every
I
human,
mean,
right?
it's all the way across.
Mhm.
So how do you do it all? And I admire everything you're doing. You're doing exactly the right things, except are we doing what I said earlier? Are we trying to fix somebody that maybe doesn't want to be fixed or doesn't want to be fixed in the way we think they ought to be fixed?
Oh, and absolutely. So there are some people who are never going to camp. I mean, my sister-in-law, unless it's a 5-star hotel and they're bringing coffee to her room, she is never going to camp. I hope she's listening because I finally said it out loud. I try, and she worked for parks, right? So yes, right? But at the same time, we're continually engaging in community conversations and recognizing that anytime that you engage with a community and you categorize, you can't say every senior wants the same thing, every woman wants the same thing, every man wants the same thing. It just doesn't work, right? And that's where this is a practice. And we're going to keep having conversations to say, how can we be better? How can we be more welcoming? How can we get more people to want to do the things they want to do? Or do we need to adapt what we do? Like if people aren't going to want to do overnight camping, it doesn't matter what race, religion, color, sexual orientation. This one ain't getting, I know. We just said that we want to have a commission camp out. And I was like, Vicky's never going to do that. Maybe if Joel brings her camper, right? So it's wrong for us to assume like a whole category of humans doesn't want to do something, right? But it is important to go into communities and have conversation about, did you even know you have your state parks? Do you use them? Do you access them? What do you want from them, right? We could say, oh, it's disc golf. Oh, it's this. I would tell you the Latino and Latinx community probably are going to say, we want more soccer fields, right? Like your community might say, I want more pickleball courts, right? Like, so there is no perfect here, you guys. There's no playbook, but we're trying to just stay in constant communication to make sure we stay relevant and that we're listening to all the perspectives. And these are all tools in a box. It doesn't mean they're the only tools, and we'll continue to pull new ones out.
And I think there's also, if there's one thing, if it's a lack of interest, and that's absolutely fine. If the barrier's fear, that's what we're trying to break down.
Want to
right?
overcome that.
And just like I mentioned when you're out in our field visit about we can use state parks as a bridge the gap on educating about fire use on a small scale. I also think we can use it for that to help address fear, because the big outdoors, the national forests, the wilderness areas, that's a really intimidating thing for somebody who's not comfortable in the outdoors, where state parks may be a lot easier for them to access and see and develop that love and interest and comfort level in the outdoor space. So it's just trying to remove that barrier, if that is the barrier. It doesn't address everything, certainly, but it's just trying to do what we can in that realm.
Commissioner Zumi and then Grasty.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, do you have a sense of among the people who do camp overnight or overnight users, what proportion of them are new versus returning like multiple times over the summer or yeah, do you have a sense of that?
A lot of returning customers.
Yeah.
You can't get, I mean, the biggest thing we hear all the time is I can't get a reservation. So even once you
Yeah.
do the introduction, it's I can't get in.
Yeah,
Like I can't.
I
Yeah.
like just my own personal experience, but also just experiences of people I know, young families, families with young children. It's really hard to get a reservation,
Mhm.
and there are generations of Oregonians who go to the exact same site
Every year, every
and
day,
they're-
their site.
and it takes a lot of organization and coordination to book out like 15 sites for you and your 15, 14 friends. And I just think that is an issue. And,
Absolutely.
even if somebody is interested, they have the equipment, et cetera, it's just really hard to get a site.
Which is not a.
And I don't
hard
know how
problem
to
have.
address that issue.
So you
building loops, building loops and shit.
You are doing it. You're adding loops to places that are closer where families may be able to come do that. We're also looking at a reservation system about how we can make that a little bit more simpler. And folks have been using it, so they know it, right? Like whether they like it or not, they know how to use it. They've been doing it for a long time. Somebody new, it's not real super intuitive. It's not, you can't just get on an app and do it really quick and easy. And so we're working on those things too, but Commissioner Grasty.
So Betty said one of the two things I was going to say, but last week I was with a group of young guys, all white, all in well-paid jobs, and they won't use the state park system because you can never get a spot.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what they said. Unprompted, what? I guess we haven't said one thing that's a political reality that we cannot ignore. I don't like it. I don't agree with it. But DEI was a very bad thing the last couple of months nationally. And I don't know how we deal with that, but it's out there. And I'm going to tell you, if you look at the red and blue counties in Oregon, the red counties, it's really out there. We got to be at least aware that that exists, even if we do nothing more than have an awareness of it.
And hopefully that's where you picked up on the beginning of all this, right? Like we have adapted what we call this over and over and over. And to me, it really is about engaging, relating, and adapting. And that's what you do as humans, right? Like, so you don't have those differences and you don't get locked into a word or what does equity mean to you, right? Like there are so many different definitions and ideas and perceptions. And so for us, it's about how can we be more welcoming and what are we going to do to constantly engage, relate to what humans want out of their state parks and how do we adapt those services? It's that simple. And I'll take that on with anybody who wants to take that on.
I'll give you a couple you want to take it on.
Okay, I'm ready.
Also, one of the things that I've struggled with as a commissioner over the years is, and I heard it today once already, is we're building where the people are. That leaves a whole part of our community in the state out.
Yeah.
And I don't know how we address that one, but that growth begets growth.
Yeah.
And that creates its own problem. I said earlier to you, Leslie Gulch and Sucker Creek are going to be problems this year.
We're ready.
We'll find out. It's going to be different than it's ever occurred before. And the Owyhee River is one of our scenic rivers, saw 4 times the usage last year it's ever seen. We just saw the end of it. That those of us who have used those kind of things know. So balancing all that and that part of the responsibility that state parks has, I don't know. It's a challenge.
Yeah, and so I guess I challenge myself quite regularly in this conversation because state parks is one piece of the outdoor recreation in Oregon, right? And so if you think about 25% of our lottery funds now go to local government grants, we are building parks all over the state of Oregon. They may not be state parks, but I would argue that some of the county parks, and I won't mention Lynn or Jackson County in particular, are probably better than some of our state parks because they have the ability to build those things locally and actually manage and maintain them. You're going to hear tomorrow that we have a significant budget problem in front of us once again, right? Because we're not sustainable. And so trying to build brand new parks in different areas where now we have to hire people, we have to house people, those things cost a lot more money than building and adding in places we already own that are closer to population centers where we're already full. You can't get a reservation that we think then that's another way to create revenue and then work with our local partners at the county and the special district level to have them help bring more local recreation where possible. So it's a bigger game than just, we're not the only one. We sat with US Forest Service last week and they told us they're pretty much not doing anything in recreation because they can't bring back their, what do they call them, 1039s, which are their seasonals. So, I mean, it's a much bigger conversation, but I do have concerns about trying to go build a bunch of new parks in places that we don't have the ability to sustain financially over time.
Well, and making sure that we're reevaluating the system. A lot of the comment today and the focus around the building where people are at is the example I would say is of the overnight parks we have between the Portland metro area and Salem, are Milo McIver and Shampooey. Those two prior to this build at Shampooey. So currently between Milo McIver and Shampooey, Wallowa Lake State Park has twice as many sites as those two parks put together, yet those two parks are the only 2 overnight campgrounds we have between Portland and Salem. So making sure that our folks that live in our populated areas have the same overnight campground opportunities are important. It's also one of, this is just a cost efficiency thing as we look at making sure we're being efficient with our funding is those are properties we own and have. They don't offer right now, most of the properties here in the valley are just day use and we have an overnight demand, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of sites. So adding that capacity. So it's not to say we're trying to dismiss other parts of the state, but it's also looking at what we currently have and saying, it seems weird that we don't have overnight opportunities right here next to our largest population base. And so making sure we're trying to be equitable in that regard, both from that access way of giving people that bridge gap and just from a financial standpoint.
I think we're close.
RV things are just cropping up.
All over the place. Yeah.
We aren't the only game in the valley.
We're not.
Providing that.
No.
We're the right one.
We're the cheapest one.
But
Right.
if you got one of those RVs, you gotta put it somewhere.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Spirit Mountain.
Pavement campers.
$90 a night. Yeah.
To be in the parking lot.
So these are just some of the things that we've been working on. In the spirit of time, I'm going to bounce to the next one and just talk a little bit about how we're going to be working some of these initiatives. I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation that Allison Watson has taken over program coordination of the DEI program. That will include, she'll oversee and manage the DEI coordinator when we recruit that position, which we're hoping to do at the beginning of the year, towards the end of this year, beginning of the new year. So within the next month or two. Allison currently oversees what we call our engagement team. I threw this slide in here just to describe what that is. That the engagement team right now is the group that kind of focuses on how we engage generally with the public. And so right now, Allison is our volunteer and interpretive coordinator, and then she coordinates a team of 3 regional program coordinators, one out in each of the region offices. So Newport, Willamette, Mission, and then out in Bend as the 3 region offices. And those program coordinators work with our park units on things around volunteers, programming and interpretation and outreach. And so this just kind of is an overview slide that shows kind of the work that engagement team focuses on. And we'll be integrating kind of the DEI coordinator and program in alongside of this so we can more seamlessly, the goal is that we would more seamlessly integrate through all of our programs, again, as opposed to having DEI as a standalone topic, that we integrate it into our program approach of how really focusing not so much on the term DEI and the connotation of that, but that idea of belonging, equity, engagement. Are we looking at our programs with the lens of do people feel belonging and welcoming when they come to our parks? Are we engaging with folks? And do people have equitable access? Finally, this is just kind of a detail slide that kind of just breaks down how that role will work. Allison, as the engagement manager, is going to focus on more of that higher level coordination, dealing with the DAS requirements, the program paperwork that you got to do when you got to write plans. You saw we started with a slide that showed the plans that have all been asked of us. She'll be working more on the program and plan aspect and providing facilitation and coordination of the belonging, equity, engagement coordinator, and then how that individual integrates with our engagement team out in the regions, and then supports both statewide operations and then our central office services as she currently does in her realm around volunteer management and group management.
Should be really nice for the belonging engagement coordinator to actually have a team and be able to resource and staff and not feel like a lonely island. I think will be very
Yeah, that was a lot of the goal, is that working in with that team, it's again a way to fully integrate in and have more of a support network for that person, as opposed to it's a big topic to take on when you're just a single individual. I think that's what we have.
That was it. I'm sure Allison would have done way better than we did, but we did. We haven't. And I just want to make sure you knew what work was going on. And I actually feel really good about where we're heading, because I feel like it's integrating finally into the organization, where when this came up years ago, we didn't really know how to bring it in. And it's like, oh my gosh, this was right in front of us the whole time. Like, we already somebody who does engagement with different communities and staff, and it'll be easier to integrate it kind of from the ground up rather than a lonely island. Betty.
Yeah, I have a question about the engagement piece. So I know that you're working with different organizations. Is there outside of like comments to parks, Is there any kind of like intentional strategy for engaging with groups of individuals who are not necessarily like represented by an organization?
Say more.
For, like, I'm thinking about like the growing Latino community in Eastern Oregon. You
Mhm.
know, is there, any kind of like a plan to engage them in conversation about what would make overnight stays at parks more attractive if they're interested in doing that?
So we started that. So those things that you saw that we were practicing, the governor's campouts, all the
Yeah.
Park Explorer series, all those things, those were intended for that. We're hoping now that we're going to be able to get this not only at the agency goals, they're going to be able to be at the unit. So that could be any central business service unit or central service within headquarters, or it could be any field. So it could be a park related. If all of a sudden, you know, a park in Eastern Oregon says, you know what, I really do want to work with the Latino community and I want to figure out one, how we don't recruit, right? I used to say we announce, but I learned a new word last week. We post and pray that people are going to apply. And so we've talked for years over on the east side to say, what would it look like? I mean, whether it was, you know, the Umatilla, could we have a conversation about bringing in tribal youth to work in our parks? Like, is there an opportunity to do things that are more community based and community specific? And this should allow us to start having those conversations. Before we were relying on like one person to go coordinate all these conversations, where now as a park manager, you can say, hey, I know there's this community need. I live here. I'm part of the community. I know what we could do. I know what would be helpful in seasonal hiring. I know it would be helpful in grabbing a community conversation and talking about like, why don't you stay here? I mean, we're talking about earlier, was it you and I, Joel, both said we've never camped overnight at Silver Falls. Why would that campground be full every night? Well, we live within 15 miles of it. Of course, we're not going to go camp there. I'm going to stay home in my backyard, right? So it's just having the ability to give the freedom to everybody across the agency to do this work, not one person.
And I think that's what I really like about the approach that we're on right now, where we have the agency initiatives versus the unit level initiatives. A lot of times the big plans that are requirements focus on things that are like, what is the agency doing? And that we're really hoping once we get the new coordinator in, that their focus will be more so towards those unit level initiatives, because really our goal should be kind of that grassroots connection. The most organic connections are folks that live out in these communities. They know what their communities need, and making those connections and telling them it's okay to staff and work on their unit level things, because they have great ideas. It's how can we support them and let them make good decisions and do good partnerships out in those communities, because they know that, they see where the need is, they see where the requests are. There's sometimes they feel hesitant, like, well, I didn't know if I could waive fees for that. And that's what we're trying to break down, is that encourage them to be able to do that work.
That's great. I really do believe that communities know what they need.
They do. We just need to get out of the way.
Thank you.
Yep. Other thoughts, feedback? Awesome. Well, thanks for the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have dinner